Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Shocker Strong Resilience. Our topic this week is committing to your goals. So, the main thing we're going to focus on today is appropriate goal setting because you can't commit to a goal if you can't set a goal. And I know a lot of people think, well, it's easy to set a goal. I have to say is this is my goal and I'm going to do that thing. But it's actually a lot more in depth than that if you want to be successful and if you want to really commit to those goals and then achieve them. So the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is something called SMART goals. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. It's become a bigger thing, probably I've seen in the last 10 years when we're talking about goals. The past couple places I have worked have even reworked their employee reviews, performance reviews, to include SMART goals. So that's what you're judging them by, because SMART goals are a very tried and tested way to measure success or to measure where someone's at. And that's actually what the M stands for. So I'm going to throw up a visual for you guys to look at, and I will post a more in-depth one on Blackboard for you to look at. So when we're talking about SMART goals, this is what we are talking about. A SMART goal is specific. So you do that first initial step of stating what you'd like to do, but you use action words and you are very specific with it. So I'm going to graduate with my degree in 2 years by following my degree plan and attending classes and turning in homework. So your action words there are following for the degree plan, attending for your classes, and completing for your coursework, right? And SMART goals are going to be a little bit more lengthy and more wordy than what most people are used to, but that's the whole point. It is supposed to lay out the path for you. So we start with making them specific. So I'm going to complete my degree in 2 years by attending classes, following my degree plan, and completing all my coursework. So then we go to the M and turn it into a measurable goal as well. So that's providing a way to evaluate how you've done, and then using a metric or data target, which is super fancy wording, to tell you if you've done it. So for completing your degree and following your degree plan as part of that, your measurement or your metric for that would be how many credit hours are you completing, right? Because that's a thing for every degree program. You have a certain number of credit hours you have to complete overall. And some of those are gen eds and some of those are major specific. So it would be by completing, I think for my undergraduate psych degree, it was like 36 or 39 hours in psychology courses, and a certain number of those had to be at like a 300 level or above. So that would be the metric you would use. Or even saying in the 2-year time frame, right? If you are already 2 years into your degree and you feel like you have 2 years left because it's a traditional 4-year degree, then that's your measurement. If you don't complete your degree at the end of that 2 years, your evaluation of that is that you did not meet your goal. It doesn't mean you failed. Not meeting a goal does not mean failing it, because goals constantly need reevaluation and revising. So maybe you have an extra semester or an extra year to do now because we've had a pandemic and you've had to partially or fully withdraw or not take a full course load like you normally would have, and that's fine. But that 2-year measure is the point where you can evaluate, right? So then moving on to achievable for your A. is it within your scope? And I'll dive into that a little bit deeper in just a moment. And then the second part is it possible to accomplish, and is it attainable? So the example I always used to give when I taught SMART goals to teenagers was I used the example of a person, a male, who is in their mid-30s and who is 5'4" tall and has no experience playing basketball outside of like high school gym class, right? Would it be an achievable, attainable, realistic, accomplishable goal for them to want to be drafted into the NBA, right? And is that within their scope? And the answer to all those things is no, right? Now, that's a very extreme example. But this is where the achievable part, you really have to dig in and look at yourself and say, is this in my wheelhouse? And if it's not in my scope, could it be? Am I just not there yet because this is my freshman semester in college and I'm a psych major and I haven't even finished Psych 111 yet? It's not achievable. It's not achievable or attainable right at this second, but if your measure is years out in the future, then you're okay. Then yes, it is achievable and attainable because your measure is not right this second, knowing everything there is to know about psychology. Achievable goals really challenge a person to look at themselves and evaluate their strengths and areas where they need improvement. A lot of us, when we are excited about something or we really want to accomplish something, we tend to do one of two things typically. We tend to underestimate our abilities or we tend to overestimate our abilities. And both are equally hazardous when it comes to achieving your goals. So if you're underestimating your abilities, you're probably going to hold yourself back and take longer than what would actually probably be necessary because you've got self-doubt or you don't think you're as capable as what your goal is calling for. And so that takes some really objective looking at yourself, and to look at oneself objectively is pretty hard, probably kind of by definition impossible. So when we're trying to do that, it's really helpful to get the input of others. So advisors, success coaches, parents, siblings, instructors, and determine, am I underestimating what I can actually do? Am I afraid to go a little bit farther because I'm afraid of messing up? Am I afraid of failure? Am I afraid of having to start all over? Those are very real and valid things to think about and consider. And then on the other side of it is the overestimating your abilities, right? Like, I can do anything. I got this. I know what I'm doing. I've done this before, or it's not that different from something I've already done, or so-and-so's already talked to me about this or walked me through it, or I've already had a lot of classes in it, and, easy peasy, no problem. And that having confidence in our abilities is great, but overestimating our abilities or being overconfident can also set us back or hold us back. That's actually going to contribute more to having to start over, or at least take a few steps back and rework some things, than underestimating yourself. And this is where we see someone who's maybe in their second freshman semester or their sophomore year, their first bit of their sophomore year, who came into college with a good chunk of credit hours from high school, either because they got dual credit in high school or they were able to take some classes at their local university or community college and come in with almost a semester's worth of courses under their belt, especially in a particular topic like whatever their major is. And they become overconfident and bite off more than they can chew and enroll in a 400 level psychology class before they've gotten more of their things out of the way, because they meet the bare minimum requirement for like a prerequisite or whatever, and they're really interested in the topic and they can make it. They can tough it through. They're smart. Again, been here before, already taken a lot of classes, and they get in and they're in over their head. And then, because it's difficult for us to admit when we are in over our head, we tend to struggle through for a while, sometimes past the point of being able to recover. And so that's where being realistic and knowing when and where you are in that process is very important. And this actually happened to me my last semester of my undergraduate degree. And I bit off more than I could chew and enrolled in like a graduate level sociology course because I needed 3 more credit hours in it for my minor. And it was a topic that really interested me. And I did just fine on the first day of class. And then the second time we met and I was listening to everybody else talk, I got so lost and realized I had no idea what was going on. And I was not supposed to be in here. So I withdrew. But then that left me 3 credit hours short of the number of hours I needed for my degree to graduate that semester. So I had to figure out a workaround, because then all the other sociology classes that were open were ones I'd already taken, and ones I needed were full. And so I had to go backwards, and I had to start all over doing a independent instruction class, independent study class with a sociology instructor I had never worked with before, but who fortunately was able to have the space to work me in. If not, I probably wouldn't have been able to meet my goal and graduate that semester because I overestimated my abilities. So when it comes to knowing what's achievable for ourselves, we're our own worst enemies. Either we're going to sabotage ourselves or we're going to hold ourselves back. And it a lot of times is going to take that outside person to bounce ideas off of or give you honest feedback to know what is really achievable for you. That was a long one. I think it's really one of the most important ones, because if your goal is not achievable, the rest of the letters don't matter, right? You're just setting yourself up to fail, and nobody wants that. That wastes time and a lot of other things, and it's just not good for anybody. So the R in SMART goals is relevant. And that is exactly what it sounds right. It makes sense to you. And this one is obviously for employees. So it says like within your job function, or it improves the business in some way. So in terms of students, a relevant goal would be something that makes sense within your degree plan, right? If we're sticking with the same goal of finishing your degree in 2 years by doing all the things we stated for specifics and measurables. Relevance is not taking a bunch of electives that you think sound really cool and you want to know about before you have your gen eds or degree requirements out of the way, basically. So when you're using those to meet your number of credit hours for your degree, I mean, that's what those electives are for, right? But they shouldn't take precedence before the other stuff. They should not be more relevant. They're not going to be relevant early on in your degree process. So, those are where you sprinkle in and fill in spaces, junior and senior year here and there, right? If you've got your gen eds and a lot of your, degree requirements done. So improving, this is business, but really if you're thinking about improving your academic career in some way, taking 1 or 2 electives that are fun and interesting and don't really apply to anything in your degree, that's fine. Everybody takes a couple of those, right? It's cool. It's fun. It helps kind of balance things out, which everybody needs balance, and those are great. But taking too many of those things, especially in favor of the things you have to do that maybe are not so glamorous or exciting, are not going to improve your academic standing, typically, because you're distracting yourself. Because it's easier than working on the goal, because working towards achieving goals is hard, which is the whole reason we're having this discussion today, and how to lay them out to make them a little bit more manageable and give you a path to follow, and just kind of, instead of winging it, basically. So whenever you go to enroll for something, think about, is it going to improve my academic standing in terms of GPA, or number of credit hours you need, or maybe you really want to take it because, is that really relevant right at that time, when you're giving yourself another 3 credit hours of work to do? Because even if it's an elective and it's something interesting and fun that you want to learn about, it's still going to come with work, right, outside of the classroom. So that's the big part of relevant. The other thing I really want to impress about relevance is that it has to be relevant to you personally. And so I see this a lot with students who have selected a major that they're not really jazzed about, and they don't really have a whole lot of interest in, but it just seems like the thing to do because maybe that's what their parents do, or like mom's an English teacher, dad's an English teacher, so my major is English. And then I'm gonna, later on go to grad school for, education or whatever. So if that is relevant to you, if that is what you want to do, awesome, go for it. But if it's not relevant to you, it's harder to achieve those goals because you're not personally invested in it. This also happens when other people set goals for you. So I don't know how many of you have ever been in some type of medical or mental health service where you have like a treatment plan, right? And in anything like that, it should be client driven. So if you're making goals with your provider, you should have input and say in that, right? Because then that makes it relevant to you and it creates that investment on your part. But if someone just sits you down and is like, look, this is your goal and you need to do this and you need to do it because I say, and that's just the way it is, you're not really going to be motivated to complete that goal because A, you were just flat out told with no input. And so then you have no investment in it. And what your vision is for yourself in the future, right? So then time bound RT is the last one. This is giving yourself a deadline. So we said like those 2 years, right? Makes it measurable. And within those 2 years, you should have those little steps along the way, right? Of where I need so many credit hours by this point to still be on track for 2 years, or, so many credit hours by this point. Or if you have, depending on what your major is, if you have some sort of exam you need to take. Like for me as a social worker, it was in graduate school, like you need to be prepared to take your licensing exam by a certain point. And some people were ready to do that by spring break of our last semester. I was not. I did not take my licensing exam until 5 months after graduation, which was fine. Everybody has their own timeline, but you don't want to wait too long and forget a bunch of stuff. But I just knew I wasn't ready, and I was not going to pay $300 to take an exam I knew I was going to fail. So my time bound was doing it within 6 months of graduation. That was when I would have my license by. And being specific about a date or time frame. So 6 months, you actually have that last month, that 6th month, to be pretty flexible. So is it by the end of that month? Is it by the first of that month? Is it somewhere in between? That is a date of significance. What specific date or time frame are you looking at? And I think one of the great things about time bound is that you can make a timeline of things to kind of, as you see them right now, like with benchmarks. By this benchmark, I'll have done this. By this next benchmark on this other date in the future, I'll have done this. And you can reevaluate and revise those as you go, again, because life is unexpected and doesn't use those benchmarks along the way to guide you and to hold yourself accountable, right? Just because you can reevaluate and revise doesn't mean you get to constantly move your benchmarks and your timeframes because you've been putting things off, procrastinating, choosing not to work on them, not because you're busy with other things, but because you'd rather do other things. But time bound helps keep you accountable, right? So that is pretty much the, basis of what a SMART goal is. Again, I've got one of these that's a little bit more in depth and related to academics that I'll put up on Blackboard later. So when you're thinking about your goals and setting them, like we talked about with a SMART goal, like you've got it, right? You went through all those steps, you have your SMART goal. It's got all those things. Then it's committing to it and committing to your goal. If you find it difficult to commit to your goal, you're in good company. We all find it difficult to commit to certain goals at one point or another. Maybe it's because the end goal is, even though we went through the steps, we're still a little bit gray or fuzzy on how we're going to get there. In that situation, we always talk about breaking large goals into smaller goals. So yes, absolutely. Your end goal is to graduate with your degree. You're a student, you're in college. That's the whole reason you're here. So perfect, we're going to leave that. But there's a lot that has to happen between now and walking across that stage to get you to that stage. And so you break that large goal down into smaller goals. And that looks different for everyone. Maybe you take it 1 year at a time, right? Maybe you take it one semester at a time. Maybe you work with your success coach to come up with the academic year or semesters. It's what works for you. I'm a person that I love calendars. I have like 7 different calendars. And I know that sounds like a lot. And you're like, why do you have that many? Don't they all serve the same function? And yes and no. I have one for work. I have one for my family. I have one for my personal appointments. I have the one that has on my phone. I've got the one that's on my kitchen wall. And are some of them duplicates of one another? Yes. But I can't exactly take the big calendar off my fridge and carry it with me everywhere I need to go to remember all my appointments every day. That's why it's duplicated into my phone, right? So that's me. I use show where those benchmarks are the completion of my smaller goals. For some people, benchmarks aren't smaller goals. They're just like tasks, like a checklist. But it just depends on what your major goal is. But for me, I set those smaller goals because it does get overwhelming. And if you're a person who has anxiety, you need smaller goals, or else it just gets too overwhelming, like from the beginning. So what we're looking at with setting those smaller goals is making sure that those smaller goals are also SMART goals, right? They still have to have all the same elements and components, even if they are smaller and more manageable. So maybe it's just getting a part-time job so you have a little bit of extra money to spend. You don't have bills. You don't have to worry about insurance of any kind or anything like that. It's just to have extra money in your pocket to, buy stuff you want. Not a high stakes thing, right? Small small, low risk goal, right? So your little benchmarks within that, your little goals within that is, I have a goal to start looking for jobs, part-time jobs for an hour or two every day, and applications every week, right? Those are your small little goals within that larger one. And those can grow or develop from there depending on, how successful you are and how quickly you get a part-time job. If your smaller goals are still overwhelming, you got to break it down even smaller, right? And if you need help doing that, or like, I don't know how to break it down from here, seek out the assistance of someone who's good at this stuff and who has basically been doing this for a living or for quite a while. So some people around campus, again, that I can't stress this enough, that are great with this type of things are your success coach. If it's specific to like degree requirements and credit hours and things like that, your advisor. If it's for a particular course, especially if it's a course that's more than 3 hours long because it's got a lab or seminar or practicum or something else to go with it, then that instructor can help you break it down. But you have people. If you are not sure what it is that you need to do, don't panic, don't freeze, don't shut down. It's okay to reach out for help. Setting and committing to goals is one of the hardest things we do as humans, because the older we get, the harder it gets to do those things, because the more life throws at us and the more balance we have to create for ourselves. So if you are struggling with any of those things and you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out to us. If you know a friend who's struggling, reach out to us or encourage them to reach out to us. We're here to help. There's so many resources on campus that especially new students, incoming freshmen, transfer students don't know about. That's why we're here. We're here to help connect you with those things. So please reach out to us. You can always contact me if you have any questions about anything specific I've said during one of these. I'm more than happy to help, outside of these little weekly blurbs and our assignments in Blackboard, which, by the way, your 2 assignments in Blackboard this week have nothing to do with SMART goals. They're their own exercises about committing to goals that are completely separate from this. So it's very important that you really take the time to put the effort into those, because while what I'm saying right now could definitely help you do those, they are 2 separate approaches to the same thing. So we can give you that comprehensive whole picture of how to do what we're talking about this week with committing to goals. Again, I'll put up extra materials and things on Blackboard this week. Just be sure to check it out when you find those. So another thing that happens when we have big, overwhelming goals is that sometimes it feels like we can't break it down any more than we already have, or we're in the end stages and there's really nothing left to do except for this one thing, right? And we hit a plateau, right? It's like with dieting or exercising or starting a new habit or breaking an old habit. That happens with, any goal, to the point where you just feel stuck, like you can't move forward. Maybe you're writing a paper and it has a certain number of pages or a certain number of sources you're supposed to have, and you just can't get there. You don't know what else to say or where else to go with it. That can paralyze you too, and it can hold you back from getting to where you want to be in a timely manner. And again, that's where we look for resources and see how we get past that. Especially look for the people who've gone before you. no matter what you're trying to do in your life, somebody's gone before you and has gone through this too. So find someone who's in your major, um, or who's now maybe a graduate student in your major. Go to supplemental instruction, go to the writing center, go to the library, especially if you're trying to research something or write something and you don't know the next things to do. Library and writing center, man, those are your two golden tickets to getting over the plateau and getting something to the end point. I cannot stress how valuable those two resources on our campus are. Writing center, library. If you need more information than that, hit me up email wise, and I will get you all the information you need. But don't try to do it on your own if you've already done everything on your own and now you're stuck. Sometimes we can't help ourselves over that hill. And we need the expertise of someone who's gone before us, who's lived it, who can tell us where the pitfalls are and tell us what worked for them and what didn't work, or, where the struggles are. Use those people around you. No one in this university, or any university for that matter, should shame or judge anyone for asking for the assistance of those who have gone before them through a certain situation. That's what we call working smarter, not harder, right? You don't have to use the old cliche, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? It's okay. I think more and more we're getting to the point where people are okay asking for help and accepting help, but it can still be a difficult thing. It's kind of a little bit of a blow to our egos sometimes, especially if we've been very self-reliant and very successful being self-reliant. But nobody can do it all on their own all the time. That's not how human beings are built. We're social creatures. We're community-based creatures. Like, this is what we do. When we talk about not achieving goals, and I use that language specifically instead of saying failing, because failure implies that you didn't accomplish a goal because of things that were under your control, right? So if I failed to eat healthy or eat right in a given day, that was under my control, and I made the choice to eat half a bag of Twizzlers instead of making myself a salad. That would be failure, because I made a choice that actively created my situation. So when we talk about not achieving a goal because of circumstances, like I said, reevaluate and revise. You're not failing, all right? Can be changed. It can be revised. It can be tweaked a little bit. People have to do this all the time, as especially in businesses, as new things happen. New technology comes out, a new process, another company develops a new process that they're doing that's better than yours, and now you have to respond to that. These are things you can't plan for, but you can certainly respond to. And just move some pieces around and have a new goal. You don't have to start from scratch. You just have to adjust. And I think adjustment and adaptability are things that everybody is having to get really, really good at right now. Because we never know what life is going to throw at us next in 2020. Especially, I remember the beginning days of the pandemic. There were a couple of memes that were about, workers and people adjusting to new policies that came to them every day. And then, like, just a week later, it was adjusting to new policies that come at you like every 20 minutes, because that is how quickly things were changing, and we were having to respond to things as we learned more information as the pandemic went on. It doesn't mean we were failing at anything. It just meant if we kept going on our current course, we weren't going to achieve. we had to reassess and, change course if we were going to achieve what we wanted to, which for care team in those initial days, beginning, month or so, the pandemic was making sure our students were taken care of, right? We wanted to make sure that people had resources if they had to move off campus, if they had lost their jobs and weren't going to be able to pay rent, or like our initial response was hustling to find resources for students as quickly as we could because that was the immediate concern. And then the main goal of taking care of our students or making sure they had what they needed to be successful and to get through things, that course, that end goal was the same, but our course changed. Our path to that goal changed because as the pandemic went on, even as it goes on today, there are different struggles that our students are facing. So maybe it's no longer unemployment or not being able to pay the bills. Kids are back in school, like that's fine. But maybe now it's the increased sense of isolation that, the only people you see are your coworkers and your family or your the family you live with, your children. Or especially if you're a student who lives on campus, like the only people you were seeing are your roommates, right? Or the people who are like here and there, because all the things you used to do socially are gone now. Or they've moved to virtually, which is still great and gives you some sense of connection, but it's not the same. Again, people are social creatures, right? We're used to having a community and we're used to that community being tangible and in person. So our focus has kind of changed to address that in order to keep our students successful. That's normal. That's perfectly acceptable. So keep those things in mind if you're ever having to, readjust a goal or just take a different path there. If you follow down the same path that isn't working or is no longer continuing to take you to where you need to go, you're definitely going to fail. Nothing in life is static. Everything changes, and it can change at a moment's notice or it can change over time. So I think for this week, that covers about everything. So we are going to adjourn here in a moment. I do, again, our every week reminders that if you or someone you know need assistance, reach out to us. You can email me directly. You can email care@wichita.edu. You can go to the link there at the bottom of the screen and submit a concern form for yourself, friend, roommate, anyone in our campus community who might be struggling or you might just have a concern about. Also, remember that this is module 9 of 11, so we only got 2 modules left, 2 weeks left to earn your entry into the drawings for the $500 book scholarship for next semester, and then also into the drawing for one of 3 Shocker swag bags filled with tons of cool free Shocker gear. So you've got to complete 8 out of the 11 modules, and those have to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on December 4th, the last day of classes. You have until then. The discussion posts aren't part of that. It is only the worksheets. However, you can earn yourself extra drawings or entries into the drawing by posting in discussions. And there are rules for that in the announcement section that I posted a few weeks ago. So keep that in mind if you're really in need of some financial assistance with books next semester, or you know that with ever your whatever course load you're taking next semester is going to have a lot of books that are going to be really expensive, because not every semester is like that, then do the work and earn the drawing. The worst that could happen is you're not going to win, which you wouldn't anyway if you didn't do anything. So might as well give it a shot, because then you could have $500 in your pocket there. I want to thank you for continuing to watch and be engaged with this program. We will have it again all virtually next semester. There will be a few changes in terms of requirements for entering drawings. We'll still have book scholarships and all that out. Just an update for those of you who typically are interested in Self-Care Sunday events. All of our in-person events for the rest of the semester have to be canceled or moved to virtually. Unfortunately, our Self-Care Sunday event for November can't really be done virtually in an effective manner, say the 15th. But I'm going to move it to spring, and it will, once we're okay to do in-person events again, that's probably going to be the first one I do, just to throw that out there for everyone. So I really appreciate you guys this week. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week at Thursday or 3:30 on Thursday. Thank you again, and take care.